It's pretty good, isn't it?
Good afternoon. This is Kaui Lucas. We're here on Hawaii is my mainland. And I'm sharing my time here with a very special person. She's relatively new in my life. Last Friday, actually, I went to listen to her give a talk on that I talked about on my show last Friday on Pope Francis's Laudato Si at Chaminade, and it was this blissed out experience just listening to her. And I floated along practically all weekend because I came back on Sunday, and so I couldn't help but ask her to come on today. And then we discovered that there's something that we want to talk about that we had no idea was even an issue for both of us. So without further ado, this is Elisabet Sahtouris, and she is an evolution biologist and futurist. And if you go to her elisabetsahtouris.com webpage, you can learn all about her. She is an amazing, fascinating woman. And right now, we're very lucky. She's a professor in residence at Chaminade University in the Business and Communications Department. So, Elisabet, can you kind of ease us into this incredibly hopeful, beautiful world that you painted a picture of for us last week at Chaminade?
Thanks, Kaui, for having me on the show. Yes, I'm an evolution biologist because that makes me a deep pastist in order to be a good futurist. If you have some idea where humanity has come from over 4 billion years, in the making, if not the whole 13 billion years of the universe or whatever it is, then knowing that past trajectory helps you to see what's possible for the future. And it was pretty obvious to me a long time ago that we were living in a very amazing time. It's a time of huge transition, and I know every human age has said this is the time, right, for humanity, and it's the biggest changes that ever happened. But it really is now. It really is now that the biggest things in the world are happening.
And the Anthropocene. We're here in
oh yes,
yes, yeah.
We have become the dominating species on the planet. And what was strange to me, though, was that I was pursuing an integral worldview, not just biology, but I wanted also to include cosmology because I'm a context chaser. And context is what gives meaning to things.
No wonder I adore you. Context is everything.
It's everything. And a rose is not a rose is not a rose. It's a very different rose to a donkey or to a perfume manufacturer, to a lover. It is experienced very differently depending on the context. And so I remember my son once saying, why do you have to talk about the whole universe? Why don't you bite off something you can chew? And I said, because when you're a context chaser, every context leads you to another context, and another one, until you have to deal with the whole universe, right? So there was something wrong to me about the science I was taught, thinking that you could get life out of non-life, that you could get intelligence out of non-intelligence, that you could get consciousness out of non-consciousness. That dumb mud would somehow bootstrap itself into these amazing conscious, intelligent observers of the universe. And it didn't make sense to me, so I started looking at other cultures and their beliefs about it, and seeing that within my field of science itself, there was a change happening in the fundamental assumptions that Western science, as I call it, because there are other sciences in the world, is built on. And it is built on whatever is obvious about the universe to the people founding the science, you see. And this science that is now global was founded in Europe by men at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. They were obsessed with machinery. Descartes called God the grand engineer, inventing the machinery of nature. And it was alive and intelligent because God, they were Christians. God was the grand engineer, inventing all this machinery of nature. And so he put a piece of his God mind into man, who was his favorite robot, not man, not woman, but man, so that he too could invent machinery. So you had this very nice 4-part model of God the intelligent one, inventing the machinery of nature, one of those machines having God mind bestowed on it so that it too could intelligently design machines. Well, then they threw God out of the picture and said, you know, hubris, we have no need for the hypothesis of God, it's all mechanical, it just happens by accident. And we were actually taught things like if enough Swiss watch parts or Boeing 707 parts blew around in a hurricane, an airplane would assemble itself, or enough monkeys at a typewriter, they would type Dostoevsky eventually. And I would say you cannot tell that story to a woman. She will worry about the monkey doo-doo and the banana peels and the rusting typewriter and the paper, waste paper, and all that stuff clogging up our universe. You know, men can sit in ivory towers and think up stories like that, you know, because they don't have to deal with the realities of the mess being created in the world. Anyway, the people called paradigm shifters were basically following the fathers of quantum theory, who had gotten their ideas from Vedic science in India. And then we had this wave of gurus coming over and yoga coming into the culture and all the fruits of a science that was rooted in consciousness as the fundamental nature of the universe, rather than accidental mechanics as the fundamental nature of the universe. And there is still this huge split in science now between the beliefs, the fundamental beliefs of the quantum theorists and the fundamental beliefs of the rest of science, including all of biology, which is still in a pretty mechanical Newtonian mode. If you look at, videos about what goes on in your cells, it's all machinery, like robots clunking down your DNA and picking out pieces and moving them over here and stuff. And there's no intelligence allowed in there. It's just all mechanical. So that didn't make sense to me. Well, once I had sorted out my beliefs about the basics of the universe and got into a conscious universe within that sea of cosmic consciousness, matter forming, to put it over in an oversimplified way, just vibrations slowing down into electromagnetic energy and then matter. I use a keyboard model where you see matter in the low keys and electromagnetic energy in the mid-range, and then the things Western science can't measure, like consciousness, mind, spirit, are up at the high end of the keyboard. So Western science started at the low end, trying to derive the whole universe, but can only measure halfway up the keyboard. And Eastern science started at the high end, high vibrations end of consciousness, and was able to formulate everything within that. So that became my preferred model. However, when I see this idea of a paradigm shift, I realize it's a conquest model where some of us want to replace the assumptions that we were taught with these other ones.
Yes. So
and I don't believe in conquest because my evolution biology showed me something that went far beyond the Darwinian model that I was taught.
And you had a very good graphic around that. I think
an evolution maturation cycle that I uncovered. Well, this is one way to put it, is with this graphic, which shows you how we got the two concepts of ecology and economy, both from the Greek word ecos, which means household. So everything that starts with ECO in English comes from that Greek word ecos. And ecology is ecos with logos, which is the design, the logic of the design of the household. And economy is ecos with nomos, which is the rule of the household. So we separated these two versions of nature, the rule of the household and the design of the household, and made our economy superior to ecology. We saw the ecology as a set of resources to feed our economy. And that is what's gotten us into a great deal of trouble.
Yes.
Now, there is no science of economics in Western science. There is only the Darwinian theory of evolution, which was adopted by the economists as endless struggle in hostile scarcity. Hostile struggle in scarcity is the model that drives evolution in the Darwinian mode. What I uncovered was that only works up to through the youthful phase to a tipping point where a species moves into a mature cooperative phase.
Okay, so that's the one about that's the next one. Okay, so here, creative cooperation.
Yes, so you see, creative cooperation is the mature mode in evolution. It's when species go through the youthful, competitive, hostile, very creative phase, and then discover that it's cheaper to feed your enemy than to kill them. And what is...
We're fine.
I'm turning
You're
it.
fine.
Okay. What is happening there is that energy expensive is what we mean, since most of nature doesn't use money the way we do, but it translates into money.
Right.
For example, we knew back in the 60s and 70s that if we had bought Vietnam acre for acre and developed it, it would have been cheaper than wrecking the countryside and killing people on both sides of the Vietnam War. And it's the same holds for the Middle East wars that we're engaged in now. However, we are in the competitive, youthful mode still as a species where war, it becomes profitable in itself because we put so many financial resources into making war that it's very lucrative to destroy whole cultures, all that war material, all those rockets and drones and bombs and supplying the military and the ground vehicles and everything makes people a lot of money. And then pretending to rebuild makes you a lot more money, right? So war has become too profitable. And we cannot grow up as a species now until we can take the profits out of war the way the profits are coming out of fossil fuel development for our energy.
Okay, so I think we have one more graphic on here.
Yes, this is one of my favorites, that nature always integrates opposites. In other words, you can't have a butterfly if you don't have a caterpillar first, right? Caterpillar is youthful expansion mode, and butterfly is mature light on the earth mode. Your body grew up in the youthful mode as an expansion economy, but then you had to stop growing and move into a stability, right? So all over nature, we can see this evolution cycle that moves from hostilities, competition, into mature mode. Now that slide, which said that nature does the opposite, shows that nature has to be profoundly conservative with the things that work well, or you'd have chaos. And it has to be radically creative in every crisis that comes along to change what isn't working. And we will never have democracy functioning until we get it that the two parties must be in a cooperative alliance with each other, not in an either-or win-lose situation, but in a win-win situation where you decide together what needs to be protected and what needs to be changed. That is the only way. As long as we have adversarial politics, we're going to be run from behind the scenes by those to whom there is an advantage in getting their way. Right? And unfortunately, those are all in the youthful mode.
Okay.
When we desperately need mature mode to get through this perfect storm of crises.
That was what was so hopeful when I heard you explain this last week, that to put a framework around this cooperation.
Yes.
So we're going to take a short break now, Elisabet, and then we'll come back and talk about something else.
Good.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hito. My show is called Climate Change Beyond Outrage. In it, we go beyond outrage to discuss solutions to global problems on climate change facing people, nations, and the world. Join me here every Tuesday at 1 o'clock on Think Tech Hawaii. Aloha and bye-bye.
Okay, I'm Jay Fidel, that's Ray Starling. We co-host a show called Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. It's really interesting. You know, Ray has a way of unzipping these guys. He asks them these questions and all this stuff tumbles out, and we find out stuff we would never know about without race questions. Thank you, Ray.
You're welcome, Jay. I'm very pleased to be your Ed McMahon every Wednesday at 4 o'clock here on the internet. So you can join us and see what's happening in the energy world, and there is a lot going on. So join us every Wednesday at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, come around, be energized right here on Think Tech. Aloha.
Aloha! Hello, my name is Patrick Bratton. I'm host of Global Connections here at Think Tech Hawaii. We broadcast live every Thursday at 1 p.m. We bring Hawaii to the world and the world to Hawaii, talking about international events and various things of interest to the audience. Please join me. I look forward to talking with you and having you get to meet some of my guests. Aloha.
Welcome back to Hawaii is My Mainland. I'm Kaui Lucas, and today we have Elisabet Sahtouris, who's an evolution biologist. And she just took us on a whirlwind trip through her life's work and talked to us about how we as a species are in that transition of moving from an immature competitive species to a more mature cooperative one. Mm-hmm. And so we're struggling with that, and she gave a very good example of how that plays out in our politics. And when I asked her to come on the show, I didn't know that she had a particular interest in vaccines, and that those had recently surfaced as a real issue for her in Hawaii. So there are 7 bills currently in the state legislature making their way through in that complicated process. And this is the one that is the HB 1722 is the one that is attempting to do away with the exemptions. So the other 6 bills are different versions of different kinds of vaccines. This one, however, is particularly unpleasant. Egregious, okay, egregious, in that it is attempting to change the HRS 325-34, which is the exemptions. So if this one goes through, no matter, even though that some of the other 6 bills allow for exemptions, as difficult as they are, this one is attempting to get rid of them. So that's that. And Elisabet, why is it? Oh, so this is these are some of the reasons that are. It's not a good idea for us to be mandating. There is no public health emergency that justifies forcing vaccination by violating the rights to freedom. We here in Hawaii have very low vaccine exemption rates and low infectious disease rates. So there isn't a reason to be forcing these medications which may or may not be compatible with any given human's own biology. So that's why we're talking about this, that it can be a dangerous thing. And I was astonished to learn that vaccine manufacturers have no civil liability. That's pretty scary. Mm-hmm. And so give us your take on why we should be really paying attention to this.
Yes, I think we should be paying attention to this because we all know that Big Pharma is getting away with a lot, and that they are based on the Darwinian business model of making profits as much as you can in the world. And so their main interest is to sell whatever they produce. And they have captive audiences more and more. Hawaii would be the first state in the United States to make vaccinations mandatory. This is absolutely unprecedented. And some of the vaccinations involved, including Gardasil and the flu vaccines, are very controversial in the world. In fact, there have been so many negative effects from them that several countries have banned the vaccines from the entire population. They won't subject anyone to them anymore. So there are big questions, and I would urge everyone to do their own research on this, because somehow we have to balance what is useful for us medically with what is happening in the name of profits to excess. Just as an example, when my children were babies, there were about 3 vaccines that you gave to a baby in the first year of life, and now it's over 40, given in doses where they mass them together. And one of the big problems with vaccines seems to be the additives, not necessarily the actual vaccine, but how it's packaged in that injection. So there's a lot to look at to find out more about the safety and the effectiveness, to try to find honest statistics, because just as in the food production system where we have all these toxics and GMOs and glyphosates rampant in Hawaii, not to mention all the other toxic chemicals, you have to look into this and see, why is Monsanto doing this in Hawaii, not contributing to our food supply? And it's not just Monsanto, Syngenta and others are here.
Right.
So the big food conglomerates, the big pharmacy conglomerates have gotten out of hand in this immature, competitive capitalist system that we're in right now. And the population has to make themselves aware. Do the research yourselves. I am not saying all vaccines are bad, but we want to know, how are they delivered, to whom are they delivered, how necessary is it, how many people are actually, how many cancers are prevented by Gardasil, and how many damages are done by Gardasil. One of my doctor friends in Germany gets the cases of the young mothers in wheelchairs who have been crippled by this vaccine, and is healing them with alternative methods, because the mainstream medicine has no cures once these vaccines do their damage. So I implore people, just as if you want to not have your politicians be corrupt, get in their faces, go in there and find out what they're doing, find out who's paying them off. You know, be a citizen of your democracy and be active. So you should look into these health measures and worry a little bit when things become mandatory. And your freedom of choice is taken away from you, which is very undemocratic.
Right. I dealt with this 21 years ago when my daughter was born, and I got a phone call from one of my mother's dear friends in the East Coast, and she's has a beautiful Park Avenue apartment, and is the most respectable matron you can possibly imagine. And she said, "For God's sake, don't immunize your child." And I thought, really, Aunt Carpy? Well, what do you mean? I had no idea that there were any chance of something negative happening. And she explained to me that her niece her niece's baby had a horrible reaction, and that is what prompted me to go and do the research. And I must say that it took some time, but it was absolutely doable. It was also easier for me in that my mother-in-law was an MD, and she taught at John A. Burns School of Medicine. And I went down the list of vaccines with her and said, okay, I don't want to do this, don't want to do this. And then she said, well, I'm okay with all of that, but there is one that I'm going to insist that you do. And so I did that one, and that was the Hep B vaccine. But it's absolutely possible here in Hawaii. I got, my pastor wrote in a letter, and so I was able to do the exemption, although I must say that my daughter at that time was in a private school, and it looks like most of these bills are geared towards the public schools, and that's where there isn't a lot of choice.
You know, I understand Hawaii being very nervous about diseases. After all, the native Hawaiian population was almost wiped out by diseases that were
Yes.
brought in on ships from Europe.
Yes.
And then later from the US. So I understand that kind of concern may be stronger here in Hawaii than in other places. But I would, as I say, urge people to do their own research before agreeing to things that sometimes the remedy or the prevention is worse than the disease kinds of situations. Yeah.
And the dollar amounts that the state is paying, I mean, it would be nice if we were spending more on good food for children to boost
really?
their immune systems, because really that is a much better defense than any vaccine is a robust immune system. And
Oh, yes, my favorite subject these days. You know, I'm a bacteria nut. Because half of evolution biology is about bacteria, and it was through the studying the ancient bacteria that had the planet to themselves for 2 billion years that I learned about the evolution cycle, because they had very highly creative and lengthy youthful phase before they started to cooperate as multi-celled as multi-creatured cells, okay? They built the only kind of cell other than bacterial cells known on Earth up to today as cooperatives. Different kinds of bacteria got together and formed the kinds of cells we are made of. And then those cells, being new on the planet, had to go through their own youth. And it took another 1 billion years before they reached the mature phase where they formed multi-celled creatures such as us. So we are the products of ancient bacteria cooperating as our kind of cells, and those cells cooperating as our kind of multi-celled creature body. And now, just within the past 5 years or so, we've really learned that even though you have 100 trillion of these cells making up your body, all very highly cooperative, each one as complex as a large human city, you also have 10 times as many bacteria coating you inside and out. Your skin and your gut is loaded with friendly bacteria that 80% of your immune system, they now estimate, is due to your gut bacteria and what they do for you. And the only way you can keep them healthy is by what you put in your mouth, right? That's the only food they get, is the air you breathe, and the food that they actually don't want the air directly. That has to go through your breathing system, your lungs, right? Because these are the kind of bacteria, fermenting bacteria and others that have escaped oxygen due to troubles in the past with it. And so if you feed your gut bacteria on good foods, and look at the cancer industry, for instance. How much warning do cancer patients get against sugar? Very little. And in fact, I don't know if this is true in the United States, but in England, the cancer societies have these cancer mornings for cancer patients, and they feed them on packaged cake mixes with an inch of frosting on top and blue dyes in them and everything. I must say there's a lot of that in Hawaii.
Yes.
and these are cancer survivors now feeding new cancers on sugar.
All right.
Cancer cells take up 10 times as much sugar as other cells. And you're not warned. So we don't have good holistic health practices in our culture.
Not yet.
Not
But
yet.
there's hope. And
Oh,
we're
yes.
going to take a short break and come right back.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on Think Tech Hawaii. I hope that you will tune in and watch the show. It is inspiring and uplifting and educational also. We talk with artists of all different ilk. We talk with them about what they do, how they do it, and most importantly, most dear to my heart, why they do it. And it never ceases to be fascinating when you get the answer to that question. I hope you'll join us on Center Stage, 2 o'clock Wednesday afternoons. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I'm a senator from the Big Island in the ER position. Every other Tuesday, I get to host a show here on the Think Tech program about healthcare. We call it Healthcare in Hawaii. It's really enjoyable for me to bring other healthcare leaders from around the state to talk about our pressing issues. Hawaii has long been the health state, but we need to keep up the momentum the inertia, and with your help and with your participation, we can come and share all of the big issues that are pressing day to day. Thanks for joining us every Tuesday, alternating weeks from 2 to 2:45.
Hi, this is Kaui Lucas again with Dr. Elisabet Sahtouris, and we are talking about the evolution biology and where humanity may go next. And I think this woman is the best cure for depression when it comes to matters of climate change and the crises in the world. So tell us some of the inspiring stories that you are collecting.
Yes, you know, I was in Paris for COP21, the big climate conference, and the most wonderful thing that came out of that conference, where the whole world was gathered, you know, 195 countries, leadership was present there, plus lots of indigenous people and NGOs from all over the world, all trying to work as a global family together. And it's never happened before that 195 countries signed anything. And they signed an agreement that said the fossil fuel age is over. This is fantastic good news. And the rich countries have to help the poor countries to go clean and green, which is wonderful. Now, it's not enforceable. But you know, enforcement, like what we were talking about with the vaccines, mandatory vaccines, is a youthful mode kind of thing to do. And the mature mode is when people do things voluntarily, when they cooperate and they sign this agreement and then actually do. So we will see. There's lots of global cooperation going on in the world already. We have air traffic control, for instance, permitting us to negotiate the whole world travel-wise and shipping as well. We have the world parliaments of religion, where the different religions are all cooperating internationally. We have money exchange around the planet with our credit cards and stuff like that, no hitches at all, going from one money system to another. We have science doing international space stations. Just, it's everywhere. It's on our agenda to become a friendly global family. And when you think of the enormous resources that we will save when we don't make war on each other anymore, you know, then we can do all kinds of wonderful things to navigate through the current crises. Now, climate change is real. It's the biggest internationally cooperative scientific work ever done in the history of humanity to show us this. And we in Hawaii are already affected. Some of our beaches are already eroding, and our sea level is eventually going to go up. Right now, the evaporated ice from the poles is mostly up in the atmosphere, which has loaded the wind belts around near the poles so much that they have moved toward the equator and are dumping snow and rain in places that hasn't had it before. So we've got global weirding, where it's, you know, it's hot where it was cool, and it's cool where it was hot, and everything is so confused that people say, what global warming? But it's all because of global warming. Now, eventually the sea levels will rise here. And I think the first order of business for us is to get this on an emotional level. We've got to grieve for the loss of the things we are going to lose. We're going to lose our white sandy beaches. We're going to lose our tourist industry. We are going to have to become self-sufficient, and the good news is we have the higher ground, we have the fertile land. We really need to get those chemical food industries out of here so that we can reclaim our land to grow healthy food on. We can do biodiversity as the native Hawaiians couldn't long ago. We can grow enormous varieties of fruits and vegetables and go back to the organic farming that has been proven, even by the UN, more productive than high-tech agriculture. Forget high-tech agriculture. We need to employ people on clean, green farms to make clean, green food and then drink the green smoothies to keep our gut bacteria healthy, right? And we can do all this. We can claim Hawaii for the Hawaiians. I'm in love with bamboo architecture right now. If you just Google bamboo architecture Asia, for instance, you'll find the most enormous, gorgeous buildings, as well as smaller dwelling buildings made from bamboo, which can be treated so it doesn't rot. We could, instead of building steel-on-steel railways that go just from shopping center to airport, you know, and aren't really going to get anyone to give up their cars and aren't really going to be transforming the families that have to pick up kids in 3 schools and then go to Walmart and Costco on the way home. We could instead, like Shell Oil has to abandon those big platforms that they have built because fossil fuels are out now. So, and that's only the last couple of years that we've shown it's so cost effective to do the clean green energy. We may have to give up an investment like that train and go to something like Brazilian eco city of Curitiba, which has the most up-to-date electric buses with little tube stations where people prepay and dedicated lanes on the road so that their buses can zip around freely, never caught in traffic, and everyone uses them. It's much cheaper, and when the sea level rises in Kaka'ako, and not even half of those high rises are going to be built by then, I don't think, you can just drive the buses out of the way, whereas your train will be flooded up to its wherever, you know. Eventually, if the poles melt completely, we're talking 60 meters of sea level rise.
Oh, that's
and
too-
this is not going to happen in a centimeter at a time or an inch at a time. It will happen in jumps of several meters at a time. That's how nature doesn't do nice, slow, predictable curves. We know from history, we can track geologically that the sea levels in the past, when Earth had a hot age, were 60 meters higher than now. That's 15 stories on a building at sea level.
And do we know
That
how
is
long?
very serious.
That is very serious.
We cannot tell you when it will happen. We can tell you it will happen because we have no way to stop it. The hotter it gets, the more the ice melts, right? Don't need any numbers. The more the ice melts, the hotter it gets. That's a snowballing positive feedback loop that we have no way of stopping.
You said something earlier about grieving, beginning that grieving process.
Yes.
And I think that's so important. I think that the reason there's so much resistance and pushback is that we don't want things to change.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
But
they're
we do.
abstract numbers. When we're given a set of abstract numbers, we can't really relate to that because our TVs are still working, our iPhones are working, the food is on the table, it's in the supermarkets. You know, what's the problem? You can't relate to that. But on an emotional level, if you see nature now as part of you part of nature, like the native Hawaiians did. They learned everything about their economies from nature itself. The way they divided the land, the way they dealt with the watershed systems, the way they cultivated, the way they had no ownership of land, but allocations and things. That was all learning from nature how to survive well. And there was a big population in Hawaii. At some time in the past, I'm told it was as big as it is today, with no imports except by canoe. You know? So it's not that we can't do it, it's that we can't grok it because it's emotional to know that you're going to lose those white sand beaches. But God, how beautiful are the rainforests higher up, you know? It is all doable. We can adapt to a hot age. Even though humans, we've been through a dozen ice ages, but never a hot age.
Never a hot age.
Never a hot age in human history. The Earth has had them before. It's not new for the Earth. But we have built all this huge infrastructure so that, you know, 13 of the 20 biggest cities in the world are at sea level and will lose their shipping ports and their airports at the same time. Our supply lines could be cut off overnight at some point. We must prepare for self-sufficiency, and we should be having a really good time doing it.
Well, what would that look like?
What would that look like is everybody getting together and saying, hey, people, let's reclaim Hawaii for us who live here, you know, and let's get it that maybe Costco won't always be around and maybe the supermarkets won't have all that stuff, and that we want to go clean and green. We have all the sunlight and wind we need to power us. We can make hydrogen out of our water. We need right now to spend our money on the infrastructure for making the hydrogen, for making the vehicles to run them if we want all those things.
Well, we do have one very enlightened advocate for that, Hank Rogers, who
Yes.
has been on the
Love
Think
to
Tank.
meet him
Yeah.
sometime.
And I haven't seen the hydrogen battery yet, but it's definitely on my list. Elisabet, you have a book that your more recent book. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, my newest book is the easiest one to read. It's only an ebook at present called Gaia's Dance, A Story of Earth and Us, and I called it a children's book for grown-ups because it's easy reading. And it will give you a real sense of this biological history trajectory that we have called evolution and why there's so much hope for the future once we understand where we came from in the past.
And
It's really inexpensive too. And eventually I'll get it into hardcover, into print.
in the print. So now you're teaching up at Chaminade, and gosh, I when I saw that I said, oh, I wish I could be a student again. What kinds of courses are you teaching?
I'm teaching living economies. The one I just finished teaching is called Living into a Thriving Hawaiian Economy. And my students chose Kaka'ako as their project to get involved in. And we got very involved in Kaka'ako in trying to figure out how to save community there, to work with the people of Kaka'ako, the artists and the small business owners, and what new businesses can we provide? How can we get more green trees planted in Kaka'ako rather than only planting these enormous big condos and importing more people? And by the way, you know, the developers and the contractors are like hit and run drivers. They're taking their money and going as soon as they finish these things on the whole, and the people who purchase the condos will be stuck there when the sea level rises. It's mostly very close to sea level there.
So many of the people who have purchased them don't actually live here, so maybe
Yes.
that won't be an issue.
Well, I expect that as long as there are available condos there, they may be going into climate refugees as long as they last. Anyway, we can do it. We can do it with clean green energy. We can do it with wonderful bamboo and other native kinds of architecture. We can do it with a clean green food supply. This is paradise in many ways, and it's the spiritual capital of the world. We have a state law saying everybody has to work by aloha principles, whether they're citizens or politicians. We need to hold our politicians accountable and roll up our sleeves and say, come on, work for us, with us. Let's make this the paradise it's meant to be.
Wow. So last week, I was talking about your take on the Pope's encyclical on climate change, and are you doing that series again?
I don't have a plan to, but it was filmed when we did it over the weekend, so there will be a DVD available, and you can find out more about that
Probably
from
on
the
your
School
website.
of Business.
Oh, from the
no,
School of Business.
from the School of Business at Chaminade.
Okay.
Yes.
And now the two of us are about to go and celebrate the 100th birthday of one of our, both of our guiding lights, Jean Erdman Campbell. And at the Still and Moving Center tonight. So thank you for coming and giving us a couple of really bright snapshots and providing a bit of context to see those snapshots in. Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad that you have chosen Hawaii as your place of residence.
Well, a big mahalo to all of you for welcoming me here to Hawaii. It's a very precious place on the planet, and I urge everyone to move into this future by doing something you really love doing. because otherwise nobody will be attracted. You have to become an attractor, right? And whether you're an artist or a gardener or a politician or a business person, whatever, there are ways to do it that will work for a healthy future for all of us.
Because you never know, we might live to 100. So I will have a wrap up with links to the vaccine bills on kauilucas.com, and see you next week.